Yeah, good evening, friends. A hearty welcome to Mr. Manu Saale, Managing Director and CEO of the Mercedes-Benz Research and Development India Pvt Ltd. Welcome, Manu, for the next edition of the VDMA CEO's Thought Leadership Series. Pleasure for us to have you here on the show with us today.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you so much.
Friends, Mr. Manu Saale is the Managing Director and CEO of the Mercedes-Benz Research and Development India Pvt Ltd. In fact, Daimler's largest R&D setup outside of Germany. At Daimler, he's responsible for offshore strategy, build-up of specific tech know-how, and R&D expertise in India and execution of global projects. He currently leads a team of more than 4,500 engineers working on various product portfolio of Daimler. Adding to his profile, Manu is aggressively working on digital transformation at MBRDI as part of the global Daimler strategy. So thank you, Manu, for joining us here on the show, Manu. Manu, I think the last 4 months have been unprecedented. COVID has impacted more than 213 countries, and almost 20 million people have been infected by COVID. Also, Manu, I think the global economy is staring at a recession. In fact, the earlier predictions were about 2% drop in the global economy. Now we are talking of about 5%. The predictions for India, also the forecast for India, are also talking of a GDP contraction of somewhere around 7 to 8%. People call it the black swan of 2020, Manu. Manu, what has been the impact of COVID on Mercedes-Benz research and development in India and also globally? If we could start with that, Manu.
Sure. First of all, thanks a lot, Rajesh and team, for inviting me to this forum with the VDMA CEOs. I think it's been a while since we got to know each other, and we're wanting to professionally connect as well. So I'm really glad that we found this platform today to talk about it. And for those of you celebrating Janmashtami today, I think we need all the blessings possible in the world to get out of this crisis. So let's pray for a fast recovery around the world out of that. Very pertinent question to begin with, Rajesh. I think the impact of COVID-19 on businesses, the way it kind of caught us unawares, doesn't matter what business you're in, has been quite unprecedented. I think there are some things with respect to technology and business. There's some things related to leadership that I want to talk about as we go on in the short segment today. But coming to the question, what did it do to MBRDI and its business? We are on a path, as you rightly said. Thank you for the kind introduction of the company as well. Being the largest R&D development center, IT center for Daimler outside of Stuttgart, we've taken on, if I may say, a lot of responsibilities over the years. And travel, being anywhere in the world or where it matters in the world, at the drop of a hat, connecting with colleagues, being mobile, even within the city being mobile. I mean, we're doing this from home today, could have done that from the office, and buzzing 10,000 people facility in Whitefield is gone totally silent today, has all taken a beating. And I think that's the major impact, the eerie silence that COVID has given, that we've all gone scurrying for cover, certainly has had a telling impact on our business. Engineering, product engineering has a lot to do with storming and discussing with teams and whiteboarding. All of that has taken a hit on one hand. So, and it's only fair, I think, and human to start a COVID discussion with the gray side of it. There's been a sunny side of it as well. I don't say due to COVID, but we just discovered a sunny side along the way. We're very conscious of the fact that we are in India, still not the biggest market by far, not for us today, and therefore had positioned MBRDI beautifully as a digital company of sorts, a digital brand of sorts, for an otherwise automotive, oriented company, an automotive company. And from that perspective, we got a boost, actually. There's a lot of tailwinds because we started to discover digital strengths like never before. It's like being cornered. It's like being pushed against a wall with no option on hand. call it COVID, and then we said, what else can we digitize? And I think this impact, if there are more to come in this segment, I'd like to talk about, because I think one way of looking at it, resilience and the way humans look at the positive side of things, we just discovered how much more digitally we could do for this company out of this crisis that came to us. So you'll see us mention probably in the next months, because some of the global car launches that we have planned all have a bit of MBRDI in them. This means India content, Bangalore and Pune, admittedly. And there's a very, very interesting, these are some interesting aspects that we learned out of COVID in the last months in India.
Right. Thanks. Thanks for this feedback, Manu, and also I think we would look forward to the new launches coming up in the next period. And coming to the automotive industry, Manu, it's been actually a double whammy for the automotive industry. Already we saw that the industry had slowed down substantially in 2019-20. In fact, I think as per the figures, it had dipped by almost 18%. And now with the impact of COVID, Manu, I think it's really hit the automobile industry. So how do you see the next 2 or 3 years development, Manu? And what are going to be the triggers for the demand also? Because I think one of the challenges that the automotive industry would face now in the COVID period is demand creation. So how is this demand going to come for the automotive industry, Manu?
Well, double whammy, certainly. I mean, it's a very, very difficult period for the auto industry. Various OEMs are going through different aspects of transformation within their own enterprises. COVID was the last thing we needed, because already the auto industry was faced with a disruption of sorts. You call it VUCA in generic terms, and companies like ours basically have a kind of a substitution for V, U, C, and A. It's just called C, A, S, and E case. C for connected, A for autonomous, S for shared, and E for electric. And these 4 pillars, or disruptive pillars, had already shaken the auto industry enough, and depending on the kind of product you made, a luxury brand like ours was going through an own journey of VUCA transformation or case transformation. It demanded unprecedented investments. It demanded you to think differently, more digitally, more software oriented, certainly much more about the customer. And a product that was invented in 1886 needed a kind of a dramatic transformation, because the customers of mobility, societies in general, were looking at, do I necessarily move from point A to point B like I did for 100 years now, or are you going to give me an alternative? So this was the challenge in front of the auto industry. As if this was not enough, and that kind of a disruption already brings with it a huge amount of financial headwinds, tornadoes, tsunamis, that disrupts the way you think, you invest, the way you talk about capital allocation, R&D allocation, and that was already happening for a couple of years in the industry. And as if that was not enough, COVID was in the corner. That first put big brakes on the market, so there was a complete cut of supply and demand both. Things we don't like to talk about at all. This is a nightmare that we want to forget in a way. But like I said, Rajesh, we soon have to come at resilience and look at the sunny side of things. I'll do that in the second question as well. What we saw in China recently, and what we hope we'll see in many parts of the world, people coming back to mobility, especially personal mobility, in a dramatically different way during and post-COVID. Sharing was a big term that the entire industry was talking about. If you want to socially distance yourself from now and say, I'd like to have my own piece of mobility, you're suddenly looking at your own car again. Maybe not an internal combustion engine, maybe electric, maybe more connected, maybe more autonomous than the past. But you're looking once again at mobility, and China just showed us what can happen. Some of the sales numbers we saw post-COVID in China, and the recovery curve or COVID curve has flattened out, as the world knows it, way before the Western world, Europe and India is going through it. And so in April, May, when they first published reports of the recovery and the dealerships opening and sorts, suddenly there was a rebound on car sales overall, not only for us, but we saw volumes more than we saw at the same period last year. Surprise, surprise, right? And the trend was clearly attributable to the fact that people wanted to get back to personal mobility and said, this is the safest place right now to get from point A to point B. So for example, if you're commuting from home to office and you consider these two endpoints, home and office, as safe places to work and to live, and you say, I need just the commute to be safe, let me not take a shared ride or a tram or a metro or a bus or a train, I'd rather go buy my own car. So there was unprecedented sales. And if this pattern now comes up in Europe and the US, you'll be suddenly looking at the auto industry again and saying, what happened? Because, I thought you had the worst period going. I know we're talking about a V-shaped recovery, and that's like very ideal and wishful. And I don't know if other markets will react like that, but this is what we are going through. So to your question, double whammy, really big blow, body blow to the auto industry as COVID, already a crisis called VUCA case that we were going through. And then comes COVID, and as an opportunity, you see people going back to personal mobility. Now, we can discuss if the cars will look the same, and if there will be still internal combustions and fossil fuel powered, or will they go back to some other powertrain. But it seems the world still finds it charming to go from point A to point B in your own space. And what is more attractive to us as a brand, luxury mobility is here to stay. It's even here to grow. Right? That is this part of the clientele elite, if you want to call, people who are successful, who've arrived in their careers and lives, who still want to own a Star and park it in their garage and drive around with it, which is a great thing. So we've actually solidified, under the guidance of our global CEO, we've actually solidified our strategy once again, redone small bits of it, but strengthened it even further. We've announced that we want to make the world's most desirable cars. And I think no better company than the company who invented the car to go about and reinvent it.
Right. Very interesting insights. Thank you, Manu. And I think, as you correctly mentioned, with people during the COVID period moving from shared mobility to more personalized mobility, I think that will be one of the opportunities also. Manu, you're based in Bangalore. Now, Bangalore is also considered the startup hub or startup capital in India. And also, you've been doing a lot of work on e-mobility, e-vehicles. So my question to you, Manu, is how do you foresee that the startups can play a role as India is looking to moving into e-mobility or e-vehicle? In that domain, how do you see the startups playing a role, Manu?
I just mentioned CASE as the 4 pillars of transformation project.
Right.
And electric is one of them, but there's a common thread that's tying these 4 pillars. One, deep tech, right? Something that's probably not, something that you probably not associate, if I may even say that, a little bit exaggerated, but not associated with the auto industry. Metal, styling, rubber on the road, power, engine, hydraulics, stuff that people have come to think of the auto. And here we are as a company trying to redefine the vehicle, the car especially, as a software product on wheels. I'll connect that immediately to your question on startups, because as soon as you bring in additional digital content, not just to design the car, but to, within the car, for customers to experience that product, just like you experience your personal, telephone or mobile phone every day with all the apps and the ecosystem around it. On wheels, this means creating an ecosystem around the car that's more software driven, right? You basically would turn the car probably into something, it's not just a piece of metal that stays like it does when you bought it, but a gift that keeps on giving, in a way, right? You know what I mean, right? It's you own it and you kind of feel refreshed with the content within the car as a customer every single day. Now that's a tall order wish from the company, tall order goal from the company, and we're working diligently towards it. This is where deep tech, on one hand, the term that I mentioned, software, the term I mentioned, and lastly, a term that I didn't mention, but what we desperately need, speed, is the new name of the game, right? Especially for a product with a life cycle of 6 to 7 years from the drawing board to job number 1. You're trying to compress those timelines, competing with simply the attention span of your customers was, kind of mesmerized by consumer electronics and stuff that happens on the showcase every 6 months to a year. You're rushing in to buy your new television and your mobile phone and so on. And you say, yeah, but the car looks the same and I've been owning it for 5 long years. So we are a company that's thinking about the customer, but wanting to change that experience for the customer in the long term. That's the global vision that the CEO has set for us globally. And that's wonderful because that kind of brings me the sweet spot into where this all comes. Talk deep tech, talk Bangalore startups, talk speed, talk startups, talk engineering, IT, talk India and Bangalore startups. In this context, we spotted this opportunity pretty early. And in 2018, 2.5 years ago, actually, in a big event here in Bangalore with the current CEO, he wasn't the CEO at that time, he was the board member for R&D, Ola Kalenius. We launched our global initiative called Startup Autobahn India, right? So I'm running that chapter, and just like every other company's accelerator program as a GCC, as a GIC, I'm running this under the aegis of, under the umbrella of MBRDI for 2.5 years now. We're in our 3rd sprint. We're a little slow learning an engineering company with the auto space. It's not an easy game to find. I mean, we're not into e-commerce and medtech stuff that you normally see out there. We're not an IT company that's looking for financial and banking solutions and stuff like this. So it's slightly difficult to directly, kind of come in touch with engineering startups. But thanks to a lot of wonderful forums around us, companies that help us in a way in the middle to kind of try and identify. There's the NASCOM that we are part of, which is also housing a lot of engineering startups. And we are not alone there looking for engineering startups. We have a bunch of auto and non-auto colleagues who are in that thinking space. So far, the success has been good. It can be better. And as we speak, we are readying for our next so-called Expo Day, where we'll showcase, come the program's 2nd segment to an end and start off the 3rd segment. So we see, first of all, a lot of potential in India in general, certainly in Pune, Bangalore, metro cities, Hyderabad, Chennai, where there's a lot of startup activity that is going on. The challenges in bringing them to an engineering world, the challenges in bringing them to an automotive world, and probably the last challenge is to take them global. This means to present that Indian idea in a global stage for Mercedes and make it part of the larger product chain. Are we the only ones facing this challenge? Not really. Especially if you're a GCC in that context with the headquarters relation that you're managing, you also know there's the second aspect of selling your own ideas and the startup ecosystem along with you. But we've got some wonderful support from headquarters so far. Hopefully in the next months and years, the full potential of the engineering startups ecosystem here in the country, certainly here in the city, will be showcased and kind of utilized. You'll also soon hear from us something towards that. So we're trying to give it a boost again in 2021. But for COVID, we would have announced our plans already now, but in 2021, there's something more coming up in terms of accelerating the startup relationship.
Right. I think compliments on all these initiatives, Manu, and as you mentioned also, I think Startup Autobahn. So I think really good initiatives that you have undertaken, and wish you all the very best also for the future initiatives in this direction, Manu.
Yeah.
Yeah. Manu, let me come to our global, our spending, GDP spending on R&D. In India, it's been stagnant actually at about 0.6 to 0.7% of the GDP, whereas most of the other BRIC countries are spending a much higher amount on R&D. So what impact do you see the spending of the R&D if it remains stagnant? As India wants to, we want the manufacturing industry to increase its share of GDP. So does this fit in the whole picture, and what would be your suggestions here, Manu?
Again, a very, very pertinent question. Rajesh, as we speak, we're just about making a representation through NASCOM, ER&D Council, where I'm a part of, and of course, through some really, really senior colleagues in the industry, making a representation to the government in various ways to look at engineering, R&D. I just say ER&D for the moment, but I guess it's the same if it's auto, medical, engineering, space, aircraft, all of that. I think we're looking that India boosts its R&D spend on one hand for local purposes, but also make it, a global destination for R&D. We can talk about the benefits. I've been in this business of, in a way, offshore R&D for a GIC in that constellation for more than 2 decades now. And I can tell you the collateral impacts, positive collateral impacts of setting up shop like this, and the kind of know-how the country has gathered over the years from the auto giants, from the medical chains, from the aerospace chains, and what we can make use of it for a country that's on the threshold of success for quite some time now, is simply unprecedented. It's not to be ignored. So we've been asking the government on one hand to boost local R&D efforts and expenses, but also probably look at various SOPs, if I may say, needed to simply encourage more global R&D to be done for India. Because I think there was this panel discussion where I just ended up saying, when one of the ex-leaders was asking me on the panel, I said India is certainly a bottomless pit of talent, with 1 million graduates coming out of universities every year, and with several hundred thousands of us in the industry with experience, or kind of moving around, and some talent available and around the companies and so on. I think we have a real bottomless pit of talent that the world desperately needs right now on both IT and engineering. And that's the strength that we have. And I think that way, I'm extremely passionate and proud about what India has to offer to the world right now and what India can do for itself. But to your question on boosting R&D expenses, I think economic growth has been closely tied to the R&D spend. Several white papers written on it. A lot of research is happening at enterprise level, companies like us spending on R&D for products, but also on the country level, how the entire governance can boost its R&D expenses. A 1% increase even in R&D spending has given significant 0.5, 0.6 plus in several established economies, direct impact on the economy directly. So when we want, we have a wish within the NASSCOM ER&D to boost the ER&D business to a multi-billion business in the next few years. We have some ideas on how to do it. And as part of this, we are even recommending locally as well as to attract foreign investments here in terms of R&D to simply go ahead and tell the government to kind of open up all those sectors. The innovation that's coming along, and R&D as a term is directly tied to ideation and innovation eventually. Stuff that can solve for us, local problems that can solve for us in this setting that we have. I use the term called frugal innovation towards headquarters when we talk about, we don't basically say jugaad, but we turn it around and say frugal innovation. It's a very pertinent term, considering how we think, how we can optimize resources, be it computer resources or human resources, how we can think about out-of-the-box solutions is certainly India's strength. And from that perspective, I think it's a chance to take right now. Geopolitical reasons as well. I think India is poised, as several leaders around the country, around the world are talking and looking up to India to say, are you the next brain pool? We already are, but I think we can take it to the absolute next level towards development. When we discussed at some point of time Make in India as well, I think we have been strongly championing engineering in India. You can tie it to R&D in India as well, towards the ministries, towards the Prime Minister himself. Instead, I think one has to go hand in hand. You have to engineer in India and then Make in India automatically happens. So I think there's a long way to go. The stagnation does not really reflect the potential in the country, and hopefully the recommendations that the teams are providing right now from the industry bodies will go a long way in fixing that issue, because it would be a pity if India doesn't stand up to the challenge the world is posing.
Right. And especially, I think, Manu, as you rightly mentioned, I think in the COVID period now, frugal innovation, frugal engineering, that's perhaps going to get a boost as cash is a crunch now. And I think that is the wave in the right direction, Manu.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Manu, maybe if you could come a little closer to the mic, we were just missing some parts of it. Yeah. Other thing, Manu, you mentioned about the R&D center being the largest outside Germany. I think we're very proud of that fact that this is the largest R&D center of Daimler outside Germany. And Manu, how do you foresee, or how do you see, or how do you assess the availability of manpower in India, especially for R&D, and what would be your suggestion to the youngsters who are graduating now and are looking for a career or looking to jump into R&D activities? So what would be your suggestion to these youngsters, Manu?
Is this working better with the audio?
Yeah, that's better. Yes, thank you.
So great question again. I mean, skill development in the country, ER&D in the country, R&D in general in the country, innovation out of that. And I just mentioned to you when we discussed the previous question that I really believe that India is a bottomless pit of talent, bottomless pool of talent. And that already kind of reflects the stress that we give on education still, the fact that there are millions of people there who aspire for a career in engineering, doesn't matter which branch, civil, mechanical, computer science, industrial engineering, manufacturing. I welcome all of them because I think, I'm a big fan of engineering myself from that perspective, passionate and believe strongly that engineers hold the key to solving some of our most pressing problems, doesn't matter in which field you are. I've meanwhile strongly also believe the digital nature of work is not limited to computer science graduates alone. We're talking a lot about mechanical engineers and digital industrial production, digital manufacturing engineering, digital, and have shown that through the kind of work we have picked up in the center in India as well, that digital now is all pervasive, right? It's not limited to the computer science graduates or electronics people, something like that. But to that question, I think I have hundreds, dozens certainly, maybe even hundreds of people reaching out in forums who are still looking at some statistics and asking me, is it still attractive to do engineering? And my answer is like, yes. You just have to be the best in the business. There's no doubt about it. And I think it's to do with all fields. If you're a sportsman, if you want to be an actor, it's always the case that you have to aim for the top. Otherwise, in a pool of 1.3 billion people, you'll be easily lost, if I may say that. That's true. That's India for you. And in a way, don't really hate the kind of competitive spirit that students have, people have here. So when I go to universities and talk to people and wish, kind of wannabe graduates who speak to us and speak to me, I say, go ahead, go for it. Just give it your 150%. Ensure that you're amongst the best because that's what India needs right now. I think gone are the days with mediocre outsourcing. India is at the thick of product development for several companies. It's not only us. I'm so proud to see several other names that utilize the Indian talent pool to develop some really cutting-edge solutions and solving some really big problems, right? Medical, automotive, all other things. So that's one part of the business. So second part of your question, which says, what do you recommend? Engineering is much in demand. You just have to go through the basics well. Yeah, there's a discussion about academia, industry collaboration. Can we do it better? Is it better to have more practical, hands-on, internship-like experiences here compared to what we normally do, classroom teaching and so on? And certainly there are areas of improvement. But I think still the focus of just getting through your studies and meanwhile even better, bachelor's, master's, going on to get your PhDs, traveling abroad to get your degrees is a welcome sight to see because I think education, engineering education is the key to several of our problems. That's on one hand. The first part of your question about, what do you tell your engineers, what do you need in the company going ahead? I think we have seen transformation there as well. At some point of time, I was running a strategy here that was, I say, more mechanical in nature, more about building the car, sheet metal, body in white, chassis development under the whole powertrain. And we built teams around it, we were connecting the dots, and we were moving ahead with a certain strategy. When digital hit us, the digital tsunami hit us, as an auto industry, I think we saw suddenly digital coming everywhere, and if I kind of concise it, we started to fantasize product development in the computer more than ever before. Nobody knew that we could use so much of CAD and simulations at every aspect of our product development, thereby delaying the hardware phase, saving time and money at the end, getting it right the first time, right? So I started then talking to engineers in universities, and even we saw the transformation in the company level of people who use digital as a tool. I mean, your doctor today needs to be able to control hundreds of electronic medical devices in his clinic not just the old style stethoscope, although it's charming still and probably accurate, and there are fans of that. Pulse oximeter is in every home during the COVID discussion right now. And it doesn't matter your age, you just fix it on your finger and you know basically what an SPO is. So I think digital is all pervasive now, and auto engineering does not run away anywhere. And from that perspective, we've been kind of mixing the digital layer on top of everything, and it makes it more attractive. At some point of time, we have a special program that's worth mentioning on this segment here. It's called Mercedes and MAC, MIM for short, where we try to encourage more women in mechanical engineering, especially. I don't have a shortfall of women in computer science and electronics, but I do find, or we found strongly, that they hesitate getting into mechanical engineering. What's considered a man's world, kind of you get literally your hands dirty with engine oil and grease and what else. And we transform that thinking, or trying to transform that thinking right now at universities by showing them the digital kind of nature of mechanical engineering and how much you need to know the system and finally go to a garage probably, but how much in front of the computer you can be creative as a mechanical engineer. And sponsoring women in mechanical engineering throughout their studies now and picking them up, and suddenly that field is open again for just diversity, right? Just look at the charm, right? Manufacturing engineering, where you thought that you need to be on the shop floor doing things. People are designing plants and systems sitting in front of computers today, although they studied industrial engineering or mechanical engineering. They're designing supply chains for us sitting in the company. Some really brilliant women engineers. They wouldn't have done it a few years ago if their parents and they had thought that this is, a man's work somehow. To give you more examples of what all digital has done to us. So, come the last 2 years, Rajesh, AI, data analytics, the creamy layer of digital, the more shiny layer of digital has taken over. And we see further new things that are around the corner that's coming up. So I think this whole engineering classic plus digital is taking it to the absolute next level. So that's my long answer to your question. What are we doing within the company on one hand, but on the other hand, what are we talking, what would be my kind of message to budding engineers?
Right. Thank you. I think this would surely, the feedback you've given, Manu, this would surely be of interest to the budding engineers. And also, thanks for sharing your views. And I think also perhaps one word from my side that COVID will perhaps accelerate this efforts in automation, digitization, what we are talking about. And maybe this would be a stream which would attract a lot of youngsters in the future also. My last question, Manu, is we are all sailing in the stormy waters of COVID. And it is also a test of leadership, Manu. We are facing unprecedented, uncertain times. What would be your 2 or 3 suggestions for the CEOs and for the leaders? How can they sail their boats in this stormy water of COVID, Manu?
Well, most difficult question at the end. Indeed, it is a question to think about. Certainly, many aspects of leadership that's come out really strongly during the crisis. Stormy waters, indeed, you said it really well. I've been saying one thing to my teams. Right? Since we started to react to this crisis in March, I've kind of told them to say, look, end of this year and probably end of next year as well, I don't think we're talking product and strategy as much as we're doing how did leadership react during COVID, right? Strategic management and product, and it's not taking a back seat, but it's probably going on in parallel. Suddenly crisis leadership has come to the fore, unprecedented. And leadership, I told them, will certainly be measured by the end of this year on how we dealt with COVID. And that kind of summarizes how important it is right now. And how important the role has become. Doesn't matter CXO in which forum, a VP in a company. Optimism has taken such a big hit during these times. There's social media doing its damage. There's the news around us, saddening things that are coming through. And if the impact of the virus is not enough, I think we have not yet seen how unforgiving the recession that follows will be, the economic recessions that follows will be. You've heard about all kinds of things around the world. In India, companies with jobs and so on, we don't have to. While a kind of a V-shaped recovery, and either at enterprise level or at a government level, unprecedented fiscal stimulus is probably the only thing that can bail us out of the woods. That's not coming. It's not happening, right? We probably won't get a V-shaped recovery. It's very wishful, and the kind of economic impacts that we're dealing with, I don't even think that, no business probably was ready for COVID that way financially. Right? No business was ready for COVID. Such a tall order ask in any segment of the business in any country, doesn't matter which economy. I guess companies are still, industry and industrial segments are still looking for even more packages from the government, and it's probably not going to come. So we'll have to work this up as a leadership team, because the economic impact, like I said, can be as unforgiving as the virus. Now, we discussed case, and I told you the auto industry wasn't worry-free before case, or before Corona, sorry, right? Before Corona. Case was there, it was a disruption, we spoke about it. And the priorities suddenly shifted from all the strategic R&D discussions we had to, like I said, crisis management. Corona is really, really too big for any business or government to react, and we can only imagine that. But to your question on what should leadership do and what we experience, there's so many points on the list, but if you say top two, you won't believe. Top on my list, actually, what I realized since March, dealing remotely with teams that are nervous, that were kind of shaky because of what Corona brought to them personally, but also to their jobs and to businesses. With the kind of reactions we saw from the world around, I mean, there are right now discussions, not good ones, that says all it takes is a virus to collapse in international collaboration like this. We have to fight it out. I mean, I've been reminding people to say a pandemic like this happened last in 1918. So this is not something that comes always. But for the naysayers on international collaboration, this was enough kind of to put a spoke in the wheel and say, look, all it takes is a virus to break down a collaboration. So companies like ours in countries like these, which are on the receiving end, let's say, of business at least, but with such wonderful talent and potential, certainly are counting on leadership. And to the first point that you were talking, leadership communication, I think, was on my top of my list. The kind of rejig we did with communication, both technical and social, non-technical, keeping people posted about what's going on, being truthful at all times, consoling them, helping them, but talking business all the time. Productivity and efficiency were taking a hit when you left the confines of the office and kind of landed home. We were at the mercy of internet connections that we spoke about. We were at the mercy of poor infrastructure around us, noises around us, home offices that weren't ready. And these were not funny anymore when you do it around 10,000 people for 6 months at a stretch. And I think communication helped to tell people what was expected of them clearly. And many of them, I think all of them, kind of all hands on deck, they just came out in support and did what they could. And we realized that we got that from strong leadership communication. We believe that this not only brought the teams now together, but that sense of belonging will kind of remain long, even after the crisis is ended. And I think that's point number one on the list. Point number two on my list, probably I'll stop at 2 points, is Rajesh, clearly, we as a leadership team realized that we need to embrace uncertainty completely. I think this whole idea of predicting the future, business planning, going behind that and chasing all of that suddenly took a hit. The jolt is so big that we're all saying, what hit us right now? And how can we be ready if a wave 2 comes? I mean, the worst prediction says that you and I will have to run around with masks for the next decade. I can't believe that. But if that's really true, and the kind of social impact it has, because it's hiding faces, glad that you're alone in your studio and me in my home right now. Just imagine this interview with both of us with masks on would be terrible, right? So the kind of emotional connect I have right now, talking to you, the warmth that I feel without a mask just cannot be compared. It's just 1 point in the whole discussion. So I think we just decided to look at uncertainty in a completely new way. We right now brainstorming on what that means to us and if we divide that problem. And I think these are 2 things I ask our viewership also to kind of ponder on. One is the importance of communication, authentic communication, leadership, talking about what they're going through and how teams can rally around that topic. And the second is the worst things that are being predicted is the new normal is never going to be like the old one. That's why new normal, and how are teams around going to be ready for that is the big thing we are working on. 2 things at least.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Manu. Thank you for these insights, and thank you for your time and for joining us on this VDMA CEO's Thought Leadership Series. And on behalf of the German Engineering Federation, VDMA, Manu, wishing you, your family, all the colleagues also stay well, and wishing MBRDI also all the very best in your future plans and endeavors. And I also came to know, Manu, you're going on leave tomorrow, so enjoy your leave and enjoy the holiday. Thank you very much, Manu, and thank you for sparing your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All the best, Manu. Thank you.